can you talk a little bit about your background, how you got into?
Okay, so I've always kind of had an involvement with language.
Hi, I'm John. I make videos to help people learn about others who are not like them. My background is in peace building, and I use creative media as a bridge where there would otherwise be stereotypes and misperceptions. And I have a growing community, an inner circle of people that are crazy and amazing enough to be on this journey with me. And it would mean a lot if you would join us, help us do more of this kind of work. So check us out. Thanks so much.
As a kid growing up in Montreal, of course, we had French at school, although we didn't speak it because in those days, Montreal was like two communities, French and English. That has changed. It's genuinely bilingual, or much more bilingual today. And then I worked for the Canadian government, and my first job was to go to Hong Kong to learn Mandarin Chinese because we were getting ready to recognize the People's Republic of China. Thereafter, I worked in Japan for the government initially, and then in the private sector in the forest industry. And then I set up my own company and have had dealings in Europe. And so languages have always been something that I enjoyed and that were useful for me. But I guess the last 15 years or so, I've been particularly interested in languages. I decided to learn Russian at the age of 60. I set up a language learning website with my son called lingq.com, which is where I learn languages. And I'm working on my 19th and 20th language right now, languages. That's Arabic and Persian.
And why not bite off Arabic and Persian at the same time? No big deal.
Well, let's say I was going to go after, it's all interesting. So my wife and I, we went to Crete and Israel. So I learned Greek, spent a bit of time with Hebrew. It was quite difficult. And then from Israel, we went into Jordan. And I suddenly realized there's like 350 million people who speak Arabic, and there's only 10 million who speak Hebrew. So if I'm going to go to all that trouble, I may as well learn Arabic. Then I come back to Vancouver, and we have a lot of immigrants from Iran here. We don't have so many Arab speakers. So I said I may as well go for Persian as well. So I'm doing the two. Arabic is a lot harder than Persian.
Is it? I
yeah, yeah.
haven't learned Persian, but I
Yeah,
hope to someday. It's all on my wish list.
right. Yeah, no, Arabic is more difficult. Has more words. I on our website, I count how many words I know. So I know about 13,000 words in Arabic and only 4,500 in Persian. And I understand the Persian just as well as the Arabic. Like there's just so many words in Arabic.
Yeah.
It's
And so
amazing.
when you're learning Arabic, are you learning a dialect or are you learning modern standard?
Well, my strategy is to get the modern standard because I don't spend a lot of time talking to people in Arabic. And anyone that I would meet here could be from Algeria, could be from Lebanon, could be from the Gulf or Egypt. So with the modern standard, I follow podcasts on Al Jazeera,
Hmm.
which is of interest to me, or France 24 had some podcasts for a while, and so I'm able to do things that are of interest to me using modern standard. We do have on our website, and I have gone through, like we have a series of sort of, I wouldn't call them beginner material, but a lot of stories that we created with a lot of repetition in it. And it's in Standard Arabic, Egyptian Arabic, and Levantine Arabic. So I have gone through them in the different versions. And if I were to go and visit one of those countries, then I would try to crank up my comprehension of their variant of Arabic. But I think as a strategy located here in Vancouver, I'm happy with my Standard Arabic.
Yeah. Well, and that means you can read, and you can
Yeah, if with help, it's hard, but I
and,
can read. Yeah,
and listen to, like you said, podcasts and
right.
global broadcasts that are in
Hmm.
the modern standard, which is great.
Right.
I can't do either of those things. I
Okay. Which variant have you learned?
my background is that I was a relief worker in Iraq from
Okay.
2007 to 2009. And
Right.
I worked for a very small humanitarian organization called Mennonite Central Committee. And I just lived in a seminary with
Right.
Chaldean Catholic
Right.
priests and
Okay.
seminary
Yeah.
students, all Iraqi Chaldean
Right.
Catholic. And their first language is actually Aramaic, which
Okay.
older than both Hebrew and Arabic.
Yeah. Right.
But most of the people that I lived with were either, a lot of them were uprooted from Baghdad because of the war,
Right.
And so I focused on learning Arabic, even though I was based in Erbil, the capital of the Kurdish provinces. So here I
Right.
am
Yeah.
in
Yeah. Yeah.
in an Aramaic speaking
Right.
community in a Kurdish
Yeah.
city, where the predominant country
Right.
in Iraq is Arabic. So I was focused on that dialect, and I actually um, learned. It sounds like the complete other direction as you, and
Right.
I hope sometime I can go all the way to the other end. So I still to this day I know all the letters.
Right.
I can look at a word and I can say it correctly,
Right. Right.
but I don't know what it means, because, as you know, the way I explain, the difference, it's like I tell people who aren't familiar with the differences in written and spoken Arabic that it's almost like you and I are speaking English the way we grew up speaking it today. But
Right.
imagine that every word written in English, every street sign, every storefront, every book, it's all like in the old Shakespearean, like
Right.
vocabulary and everything.
Right. Right.
And that's what Arabic is like. I learned how to just chat with people totally by
Right.
listening and making them repeat a lot and
Right.
writing down notes. And
Mhm.
so now because of that sort of full immersion experience, I was able to learn to speak Iraqi really well.
How long did you live there?
I was there for 20 months.
Okay, that's a long time. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yep. And I'm still still don't get the gender right every time, and
I don't worry about that.
I find that Iraqis are very forgiving with my mistakes, because I guess white people, Westerners, are not I guess we're not that many who can speak it really well, so
Right.
they just appreciate somebody trying.
No doubt. It's interesting too. Like a lot of the podcasts that I listen to, they'll have Iraqis on there, Yemenis, Sudanese, Algerians, Lebanese, and they're all speaking standard Arabic. For the purposes of these discussions, they're all speaking standard Arabic.
Mm-hmm.
And even if I watch a Lebanese movie, if there's a television on in the background, they're speaking standard Arabic. So standard Arabic is present. And as you say, in the street signs and stuff like that.
Yeah,
But
of
it's
course.
not what people speak amongst themselves.
Right.
But certainly if I were assigned to Iraq and I was going to spend 6 months there, then having my base in standard Arabic, like I found that with a base in standard Arabic, Lebanese and Egyptian were not that difficult to get a hang of. You pick up on some of the k becomes a like it's not pronounced, and then they use I can't remember, shwiya or whatever. There's a lot of words that that are not used in standard Arabic.
Yeah.
But,
And
it's all one. It's all one.
and Egyptians are known for the jim becomes g, the
G,
hard
yes.
g, so that
Shukran gazilan. Shukran gazilan.
Well, that's great. So you started learning languages a long time, and how did you I guess one thing that I would love to hear from you is a question that I get a lot, and that is that so it's challenging to learn anything new,
Right.
and learning and remembering, vocabulary and
Right.
phrases and things in another language is challenging, of course.
Right.
And so I think a lot of people have the experience of giving it a try, finding out that it's hard, that they're disappointed with how much they don't remember or retain. And then
Right.
they conclude, I'm not good at learning languages.
Right. Right.
And I don't think that's true at all. I think it's it depends on an individual's mentality, but also the techniques and the conditions and all sorts of factors. And I don't think age matters. I have a 2.5-year-old.
Right.
And the common wisdom is that babies can learn language so fast. And
Right.
and I seeing this firsthand now, he's learning to speak, more and more every day. And it seems like in a span of a few months, now he has all these words, but that's not when he learned it. He's been hearing it since the day he was born. He's been listening
Since before
for
he was born,
for
even.
2.5 years. And an
Right.
adult, if they were completely immersed and
Right.
the only way they had to communicate was in this language, an adult could do that much faster, I think. So I think people don't give themselves enough credit. So what would you have to say to people who
think they're not good at languages?
Well, I would get at a number of the things that you said. First of all, that it's difficult to remember these things. I don't rely on memory, okay? Because you can't. You're going to forget. You're going to forget more than once. You're going to continue to forget. But all the while that you're exposing yourself to the language and forgetting and relearning and forgetting, this is all going into your brain. And your brain is gradually starting to put these things together, create connections, create patterns. That's what the brain does. The brain is designed to do that, okay? So the brain will, with enough stimulus, with enough experience with the language, the brain will eventually start to put things together. Don't rely on memory, and don't get upset when you forget. That's point number one. When I start in a language, we have, again, on my website link, we have these what we call mini stories, 60 of them, with the highest frequency verbs and conjunctions. Those are the keys. And each story repeats the same vocabulary 5 times from different points of view, different tenses and stuff. And I listen to these over and over again, and I read and I look up the words and then listen again. And I find it, and when I'm in that initial stage in a language, when I'm trying to discover the language, I find that quite captivating because I'm trying to discover the language only through this sort of passive listening and reading without trying to remember anything. At the second stage, which is where I am now in Arabic, I am interested in the things that I'm listening to and reading because it's about politics in the Middle East or whatever it might be. Or in the case of Persian, I have a girl in Iran who's creating this sort of history of Iran in 26 episodes. And so I'm learning about the history of Iran. So now I'm not actually thinking about trying to learn the language. I don't care about what I forget. You're learning about stuff while the language is continuing to penetrate your brain. And so ultimately you have to rely on your brain to start to put things together. And so if you take that attitude, that it doesn't matter. Now, granted, if you're living in Iraq and you have to use the language today now, there's more pressure to produce the language. But if you're like me living in Vancouver, I have no pressure to produce the language. So the focus is on comprehension. If I get a sufficient, level of vocabulary and comprehension, the speaking will come quite quickly, because then I can engage with people and I can understand what they're saying, which makes me more comfortable, and then I can struggle to start producing the language. But in normal language instruction, they try to get you to produce the language now, upfront, correctly, and that's just not practical.
Yeah, yep, I totally agree. And it's I always find myself coaching people that saying, if you are focused on, if you're paying attention to what you're saying and you're thinking about the words, it's almost like, I don't know what a good analogy would be, but you're putting a filter and putting brakes on your brain,
Right.
that is slowing you down and messing you up. If you just you get over the self-consciousness, you get over the embarrassment, you get over the worry that you're not doing something right, and just let your incredible brain do what it is designed to do, you will see incremental progress, and
Absolutely.
that and patience, of course. I think a lot
Trust
of
yourself. Trust yourself.
absolutely.
Yeah, right. Actually, I agree. Yeah. Well, Stephen Krashen, who is very famous, exponent of, input-based learning, and he talks about the affective filter. So if we're going to start thinking about grammar rules while we're speaking, that is only going to inhibit us. It's like the proverbial centipede trying to decide whether he starts with his left foot or his right foot.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, what's your so you've learned a lot of languages, obviously, because you really enjoy it and you love it, and you also enjoy helping others learn, which is wonderful. A big thing for me is, so my background is in social conflict resolution and peace building.
Right.
Why do big groups of people become divided on the basis of identity or some other thing, and ultimately get into harmful systems and relationships, and how do we change that over time? So somebody who is helping people access the world of some other kind of person through the gateway of language is really something that I feel strongly is really good for the world. And so I really appreciate that. What is your where's all this going to go? Are you just going to learn every language there is, or what are your plans?
Well, First of all, I'm not as optimistic as you about whether speaking other people's languages makes us less likely to get into conflict with them, because we have only to look at the former Yugoslavia or Iraq or Northern Ireland or anywhere, and
Of course.
people who actually speak those languages manage to find all kinds of reasons to get mad at each other, which is very unfortunate. But I think learning languages just makes us more aware of the world we live in, of the people who share the planet with us. I have to say that until I started learning Arabic and Persian, I had kind of a caricature view of those people. Very much a sort of a flat view. And now that I've gotten into those languages and heard them speak in their own languages, it kind of fills out a little bit about who they are. And as I learn more about their history and the differences in the different regions, and then I have enough of the language to watch a series on Netflix and all of these different things, it just brings these people to life. So in my own case, I'm not doing it because I think it might help make the world a better place. I think all of us have an opportunity through language to discover more about the world, and I just find it incredibly fascinating. So in my own case, having done a bunch of Slavic languages and I have Asian languages, so then I said I should go into the Middle East. So now I want to spend a few years with Arabic, Persian, and eventually Turkish. I'm going to do Turkish as well. Then I may move on to Urdu and Hindi, because there's an awful lot of people who speak those languages. And Urdu is a natural progression from Persian. Persian culture had a huge influence on, India.
Arabic also, a lot of Arabic words in Urdu.
Right, but I think, I don't know whether that came through the religion or through the tremendous influence that the Persian culture had with the Mughals, who were Turkish, but who basically, Persian was like the Latin of the day, right? Was the sort of highbrow language. So anyway, whatever, that's all for me to discover. So through the language, I will learn, the influence and the history of that part of the world. So it's just nice. It's like people travel to see the world. I travel through language to discover different places, different cultures, different histories. And if I run into people who speak those languages, I'm able to communicate with them, which is a lot of fun.
That's the biggest joy for me, is being able to connect with people that I otherwise couldn't. The first language that I learned was Spanish when I studied abroad in Ecuador in college. And I struggled in high school and college to learn Spanish out of a textbook for 1 hour, a day, 3 days a week.
Right.
And then I get to Ecuador, and then I realize, oh, you mean all I have to do is say this, and you know what I need, and I can get it, and and it just completely opened up.
Right.
And so I really appreciate that the ability that language. Learning the language has allowed me to access people in a way that I, just like you described, you have an awareness of them, but you don't really see the contours and the topography of a culture and a people as well as you can when you learn about their worldview and their thinking by the words that they use and the expressions.
And I think too, in North America, we're North America centered, Western European centered, and we think that's the whole world. It's just a very small part of the world.
Absolutely. I just think it's really, really great. So as a tool to do that, you've developed Link. Can you describe the basic methodology and how it's different maybe than some of the methods that are out there currently?
Yeah. Link is basically, it sort of came through my own experience of language learning, where long before we had Link, I would read and listen a lot. Like reading and listening, input has always been a big part of my language learning. And typically, if you read a book and every 10th word you don't know, like this would have been the case for me in Spanish or German, then I look it up, or I make a list of these words, and then the minute I close the dictionary, I've forgotten what I looked up, what the meaning of the word was. I make a list, I never look at the list. We designed a system which is based on input, based on the abundance of content on the internet, based on the convenience of MP3 technology, the convenience of being able to download something on your computer and you have it on your iPhone and you have it with you wherever you go. And I mean, I have in my iPhone, I have a language library of audio and text where I can click on words and see the meaning, where I can review flashcards of words that I've looked up. And Link just basically enables you to access that. You can import stuff from YouTube. We have lots of good content in our libraries for the earlier stages, and then you just access whatever you want on the internet. The emphasis always is on listening and reading and then being able to look up words. Even if it's conjugations, you can look up the conjugation when you're clicking on that word. Like a lot of things that just make it more convenient and therefore easier, faster to learn a language. The basic principles are still the same. Listening and reading, and then once you've got a certain level of comprehension and vocabulary, you need to speak a lot. Unfortunately, if you don't live where the language is spoken, that speaking a lot part is difficult to organize.
Mm-hmm.
So, living here in Vancouver, I spend a lot of time on input, but I can connect with tutors, online if I want to, but I tend not to do that much of it. However, when I was in Morocco, there wasn't a taxi driver that I didn't attack with my standard Arabic.
And people like you and I are lucky in that regard, that we have the ability to travel and get to know other cultures.
Right.
And I was playing around on Link, on the app, on the free version. And by the way, I should say, you and I are not exchanging any money. We're talking because we both love languages, and your team looked me up and said, "Hey, would you like to chat?" And I said, "Sure, definitely." But what I liked about the app was that, like you said, many different types of stories and things. And then when you're reading, it keeps track of words that you don't know.
Right.
And then when you see it again, it lets you know that this is a word that you saw before and then found out the meaning of. So it gives your brain a little extra, oh yeah. And I think like you said, with the input, to let it, what did you say? Let it float through you or
exactly. It's got to stimulate the brain. And because we don't remember that we've seen a word before. To me, listening and reading, but I get up in the morning, I make breakfast, I listen. If I'm in my car, I listen. If I like to work out and exercise, I listen. And then I find some time during the day to read what I listen to, looking up the words. But I do it every day. So you have to put in the time. The keys to language learning success are your attitude and the amount of time you put in.
Repetition and letting your brain do its thing.
Exactly.
Well, thanks so much for sharing some of your technique and experience. And I'm a huge proponent of. I just nerd out on it, so I appreciate the opportunity to be able to chat with you.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Thank you, Steve.
Same to you. Bye.
Bye.